Hi, welcome to Tuesdays with Terra. I'm Terra Bundance, and today I'm going to talk about codependency and triggers. So, this is a topic that's near and dear to my heart because it is something that I've not only experienced and dealt with for myself, but it's something that I've done a lot of study and research about. I like to work with some of my clients around codependency, and I've been involved in CODA and other 12-step programs that support my understanding of codependency at a different level than the average person. So I really want to be very honoring and be mindful that some of the things that I may be talking about could cause some triggers or they may be a little bit uncomfortable. I'm not going to go into a lot of heavy detail. Basically, what I'm going to be talking about in this video is common signs to look for in yourself and in others around codependency, and also a little bit about deal breakers and red flags. So I've been working with something that I call a codependency bubble. And it's really easy to look up codependency online and look at what some of the things are to be mindful of and aware of. But really, anyone who considers themselves prone towards codependency or fully codependent, we each have our own kind of bubble of what fits into our form of codependency and how it shows up in us. So I'm going to just list off a few things that I would put into the codependency bubble. And that's not necessarily mine or yours. And there's going to be more that I'm not mentioning, and some are more focused and some are more intense. So just be mindful that when I'm listing these off, that if you want to look it up and just do a little bit more research about each individual thing, something that may pop out to you and be like, that sounds like me, or wow, that sounds like somebody that I know. Be very, very mindful that if you're looking up these things to point them out to your partner, you're probably codependent. And the reason I say that is because when it comes to codependency, anytime we sort of put the blame or the shine the light on the other person, more often it's because we're not willing to take responsibility for it for ourselves. And so I'm going to just go ahead and list out some of the things that show up as possibly fitting into a codependency bubble, and just maybe take notes, jot down the phrases or the words that stand out to you that may be something that you would like to work on for yourself. I'll probably be touching on a lot more of it throughout this month because I'll be doing a meditation in the second week of May, and then I'll be doing some focus wheel and EFT on it later in the month. Okay, so here's my list. Easily triggered, jealous, perfectionism, know-it-all, people-pleasing, poor communication, low self-esteem, overwhelm, trouble identifying one's own feelings and emotions, boundaries, and more than likely lack of boundaries, or you cross over other people's boundaries without thinking or considering yourself and others and the damage that it might cause. Care for others before self, being taken advantage of, being taken for granted, desire to feel important to someone else, like a strong desire to always only feel important, like the most important person in someone else's life. Not taking responsibility. That's a big one. That's one of the big ones. Not taking responsibility, in other words, blaming others for everything, putting it all on someone else as if you have no responsibility in any situation that you're in. Also, taking too much responsibility. In other words, being the one to blame for everything, taking on the blame for all the things that are going wrong, whether it's in relationship or other situations. Shaming others, shaming yourself, taking things personally, taking things overly personally all the time. Feelings getting easily hurt, another way to say taking things personally. Overly critical of yourself or others. Sarcasm, like making fun of yourself or others and being sarcastic all the time instead of dealing with whatever feelings might be coming up. Bullying, another aspect of codependency that gets to an extreme. In other words, if you're picking on other people, but then you use it as a tool to gain approval from someone else or to feel better about yourself. also easily defensive. Now, of course, the ones that I just named are just a few. There's many, many, many others that might show up. And if you think of any that really stand out to you, go ahead and share them in the comments below, because this is a conversation that I love to have ongoing. I really appreciate other people's perspectives and thoughts around this particular topic. So I'm going to go ahead and talk about a few of these individual things that really stand out to me that I like to talk about the most, responsibility being one of them. So when we don't take responsibility, basically we're putting a lot of energy out there in the world that says, I am not to blame for anything that goes wrong in my life. In other words, it's someone else's fault. It's my parents' fault. It's my partner's fault. It's the job's fault. It's everyone else's fault. Basically, when we don't take responsibility for our own lives, we're giving our power away. And that's a big, big sign of codependency, when we give our power away so much that we're not willing to take ownership of our own life. Ownership means we have to take responsibility for our choices, for our experiences, for the times that we get into relationships that don't work over and over and over and over again. You become the center of all of those relationships. You become the common denominator. And so at some point, it becomes our responsibility as individuals to recognize how I keep creating the same thing over and over and over again. Then there's the flip side of that one, that's taking on too much responsibility, taking on all the blame, acting as though no one else is to blame for this thing, that you're the common denominator of all things in the world, and that you are to blame for every bad thing that happens. You can't take on responsibility for someone else, especially someone else who's an adult, a smart adult who shows up in their lives. If you become the blame for everything and you take on the blame for everything, again, you're giving away your power. You're giving away your voice. You're giving away your own ability to own your life. Perfectionism. That's a big one. And it stands out a lot because people often try to make things perfect so that they don't look bad to anyone. And the thing is, we're always all at some point in our lives going to make mistakes. And so if we can't take responsibility for the mistakes that we make, we're going to try to look like everything has to be perfect. And life isn't perfect. Life is full of problems and mistakes and stumbling and accidents. And that's how we grow. That's how we tend to grow and evolve, is through those accidents and mistakes that we make. So being perfect isn't going to make bad things go away. It's actually kind of in being in denial that you're a human being and that we all make mistakes. So recognizing that perfectionism isn't going to support you may be a way to let go of a little bit of codependency towards yourself and towards others. Another aspect of perfectionism is being a know-it-all. So you may not try to make everything look perfect, but you may try to look like you know everything and that nobody can teach you anything new. Well, how are you going to grow, right? That's an aspect of codependency, trying to be a know-it-all. Oh, I know. And then later realizing you don't actually know. So it's okay to admit, I don't know what that means. Can someone explain that to me? Can you say that again? I didn't understand what you just said. That's owning your life. That's having ownership of your feelings and your emotions. So then we go to not being able to claim feelings and emotions, another aspect of codependency. So that one really stands out because when you can't own your feelings and your emotions, you're going to go through life acting as if your feelings and emotions don't matter. And of course they do. All of our feelings and emotions matter. As a matter of fact, that's how, again, how we grow. When we can recognize, I don't like the feeling that I'm having right now, gives you strength, gives you power, gives you courage, gives you confidence. And when you can tune into those feelings, that's when we start talking a little bit about red flags. So I'll talk about that in just a moment. People pleasing, just trying to make everyone happy all the time. Can't happen. We can't make everyone happy all the time. We have to be happy too. And so if we're always looking to please others over self, then that aspect of codependency basically puts us second in life. And we can't be second. We're the main actors in our own lives. We're the center of our own world. And so we have to come first. when it comes to taking care of things. It's just like that whole mask on your face in the airplane. You can't put someone else's mask on and hope that you're also going to survive. You have to put your mask on first, the oxygen mask, when it drops down in an airplane. You have to put your mask on first before you put someone else's on, whether it's your children or anyone, because you have to be able to breathe. You have to be able to function in a way that supports others. And the way you do that is you take care of self and then you take care of others. And of course, there's emergency situations where you have to, some people put themselves in harm's way to protect or save their children or to save someone that they care about and love. Those are very few and far between types of experiences. And those are going to stand out as obvious differences in that whole rule. But when it comes to general life, taking care of self first is way important, because then you become a stronger, better person to be able to support and help others. Taking things personally, that's a tough one. When we're always taking everything that happens around us personally, we're basically acting as if the whole world is against us. And the truth is, the whole world isn't against us. Codependency is a trauma reaction. It is one of the strongest trauma reactions that we have as human beings. So if you've experienced a lot of trauma as a child, then generally you're going to have to figure out how to deal with that trauma in some way, shape, or form. So therapy is very beneficial. Counseling is very beneficial. Getting support, getting help from some place that helps you deal with whatever trauma might have shown up in your childhood or throughout your adult life. To deal with those traumas helps us become more present with our lives and more conscious of how we take care of ourselves. When we don't deal with the traumas, a lot of times these things, these little places, these little things that I'm talking about within that codependency bubble take over our lives. And so if we're not taking care of ourselves, then we're going to take a lot of things other people do and say personally, including things that we do and say about ourselves. We're going to take things personally to an extreme that isn't healthy. It doesn't support us to take everything personally. When we recognize that nothing that other people do or say is personal, then we can also take ownership of our own life and set better boundaries. And so boundaries being such an important part of how to deal with codependency. When we don't set boundaries for ourselves, people take advantage of us. When we don't set boundaries for ourselves against things that other people are doing, we put ourselves in harm's way. We basically are putting ourselves in situations that don't support us and actually feed into our trauma. So being very conscious of a lot of these codependency things. If you have any questions about any of the ones that I mentioned on this list, blaming others, shaming others, being ashamed, letting others shame us, that's allowing bullies to take us over, or being bullies towards others, sarcasm and making fun of others, self and others, using that as a joke. Sarcasm and then putting ourselves down or putting someone else down as a joke isn't actually a joke. It's not funny. It's not funny to be sarcastic. It's not funny to take advantage of other people or make fun of ourselves or others as a way to not deal with our pain that might be coming up, because that's one of those places that we're avoiding our feelings and our emotions. So if you're feeling uncomfortable and you feel like being sarcastic or making a joke about something, maybe instead tune in. What am I feeling right now? I'm feeling really uncomfortable. It's okay to, instead of sarcasm or making fun of or making a joke about something, go, I'm really not feeling very comfortable in this situation. You don't have to say that out loud. You can do that by getting up and leaving. Taking care of yourself in a situation that feels traumatic or uncomfortable, or you don't know how to deal with it. It's okay to say something, to make a point of saying, I'm not okay with this, and walking away, or continue to set a boundary by saying something like, I'm uncomfortable with what you're saying right now. I'm uncomfortable with what you're doing. Anytime we find ourselves in situations that are uncomfortable, we have to take responsibility for what got us there in the first place, and or getting ourselves out of it. Fight or flight doesn't have to happen when we're aware of our feelings, when we're aware of our emotions. So this leads me to deal breakers and red flags. So their deal breakers could be something like you're in a situation where you are talking to someone and you're considering the possibility of being in a relationship with them, a friendship or a partnership or even a business relationship with them. And you notice that they're sarcastic. You notice that they smoke cigarettes and you don't. You notice that they do things that are uncomfortable for you a lot. And that could be a deal breaker because it might be something that doesn't bother other people, but because it's something that bothers you and you don't do something about it or go ahead and set a boundary or take care of yourself and go, this isn't going to work for me, then you basically put yourself in a situation that's going to be unhealthy in the long run. Deal breakers could be things as simple as you don't like the way a person dresses every day. And that doesn't mean that the other person is wrong. It just means it's something that doesn't work for you. Somebody could have greasy hair every day or a certain smell that doesn't work for you. And if they keep showing up with this thing that's uncomfortable to you, and you just kind of pretend like you're okay with it, then over time it becomes a problem. Okay, so deal breakers are things that just don't feel right to you. You're uncomfortable with them. They just don't work for you. And it's not going to change. The other person may not change. You may not change, but you've got to be able to say, this isn't going to work for me because of these deal breakers. Now, red flags are something a little more extreme. Red flags are things like drug abuse, alcohol abuse, yelling a lot, taking things out on other people, being rageful, blaming people to an extreme. So if you see certain traits like that show up in someone and you realize like this is a red flag because this is going to show up in every situation, every experience, every relationship that person has, because it's a way that they deal with their own trauma or don't deal with their own trauma. So here is a list of red flags to consider when you are having a connection with someone and you're looking to possibly have a relationship, a deeper relationship with that person. Some red flags could be addiction, like drug, alcohol, sex, porn, gambling, any kind of addiction, something that people can't stop doing that takes over their lives. And when those things show up, and you realize this is scary, this is uncomfortable, this is something that's not going to go away unless that person decides to take responsibility, but they probably haven't if they're still doing it when you've met them. So addiction is a definite red flag. And so if it's something that you are doing or something that someone else is doing, it's important to take responsibility for that and figure out, is this something that I'm going to continue doing or that they're going to continue doing? And I need to set a boundary for myself or change the way I'm doing things so that I can have better relationships with people. Another thing could be violence or rage, obviously a red flag. Eating disorders could be a red flag for yourself or for others. Recognizing that someone has an eating disorder, you want to get them help, you want to support them, but if they're not open to that, then that's a red flag. That's something that's going to show up and really extremely affect your life on a regular basis in a negative, unhealthy way. Mismatched relationship goals. You may not share the same ideals around kids or no kids, living together or not living together, religion and spirituality, politics, how to raise your kids or your pets. When those kinds of relationship awarenesses or traits are very, very vastly different, then that's going to cause some problems in the long run. Jealousy or distrust usually comes from a trauma reaction. But if somebody is highly, highly jealous and doesn't trust anything or anyone, then of course you're going to have problems in the long run in your relationship to that person. A history of infidelity. Now, this is, of course, in the partnership relation, like a sexual relationship that you might have with someone else. If they're constantly known to sleep around, that's a red flag. That's something that you think, okay, am I okay with this? Fine. If you're okay with it, cool, get into that relationship. If you're not okay with it, it's not something that just goes away. It doesn't go away just because you're a good person. So that's the thing about these kinds of red flags, is that these things don't just go away because you're a good person. And the thing that we end up doing as codependent people is somehow we think we're going to come in and be the savior of that person. Doesn't happen that way. That is codependency. in a nutshell. When we often come in thinking, da 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 da, I'm going to be the superhero of this person's life and I'm going to change their life in so many ways by pointing out the things that they're doing that's wrong and not healthy and not beneficial to them. If they want to know that, they will probably ask someone else. And if you're finding yourself in a situation where you're thinking, oh, I could help this person, walk away. Because not only is that a red flag for you, but it's also you trying to codependently fix another person. Trying to fix another person or allowing someone over and over again to try and fix you, that's codependency. That's what codependency looks like. You might be the receiving end of someone trying to fix you, or you might be the fixer. Either way, codependent. Both parties are codependent, trying to change another person's life or allow their life to be changed by another person because we think we love them so much. And if we are willing to stay with them, then we're going to make these changes. That's a red flag. The other person could be controlling in nature. And so that's a perfect example of, someone trying to fix you or you trying to fix another person, controlling nature. They have no friends or you have no friends. That can show up as kind of a red flag because you wonder, like, what is it about that person that others don't want to have anything to do with them? Stories of crazy exes. In other words, they're not taking any responsibility for past relationships that have gone bad. And that can always be a red flag. That's like, okay, this person's not going to take responsibility in any type of situation because they're obviously blaming everything on the exes, or they're blaming everything on parents, or friends or situations, businesses, jobs, always putting responsibility off on someone else, blaming exes, talking about their crazy boss, talking about their horrible parents. And the thing is, all these things could possibly be true, but if they're not taking any responsibility, they're going to always be living in the trauma response and kind of expecting it or looking for it in every relationship. They give you all of their time, all of their attention. Every second of the day is them being a part of your every experience and the way that you live your life. They want to have everything to do with it. That can become very, very, very bad over time because it's unhealthy for someone to need you as their only person, because we can't be only that person's person. We need friends, we need groups, we need gatherings, we need situations where we do things possibly together, but that we have other friends as well. You can't be someone's one and only. And the reason that I say that is because, some people may live that way. Great. No blame, no shame. For the most part, when you try to make someone the center of your life, or someone tries to make you the center of their life, that means they are making you, or you are making them kind of the god of your understanding. Basically, you're making them the center of your happiness. And when someone else is the center of your happiness, or you become the center of someone else's happiness, something bad's going to happen in that situation at some point. It's going to go south, because you can't hold a person up on a pedestal forever and ever and ever and them never make mistakes, because when they make a mistake, it's going to look like the worst thing ever. And they're bound to make mistakes, or you are bound to make mistakes. So you're not, whenever you are the center of someone's attention, or you putting someone else as the center of your attention, basically the two of you are going to be walking on eggshells, hoping not to make mistakes all the time. Not a healthy situation. Frequently lying or making things up. Lack of emotional intimacy doesn't mean that some people aren't intimate, and that's okay. People find each other in relationships, and one person might be intimate and the other person is not. But emotional intimacy is something different, someone where you can trust the other person, you can talk about things together. And that's pretty important. It could be a red flag. An unwillingness to compromise, set in stone perfectionism, or dead set that this is the only way things can work out, is if this and this happens. Huge red flag. So these are red flag indicators. Just a few. I mean, there's probably many, many more. Finding out that someone harmed others could be a huge red flag, but just recognizing that red flags are something that really stand out as a huge aspect of don't start a relationship, knowing these red flags. Now, the only way that we can recognize deal breakers and red flags is to talk about them, or write them down, or notice what hasn't worked in the past. whether it's been other relationships or businesses or partnerships or family relationships. Things that have not worked in the past are going to show up in relationship. And when you find that they show up over and over again, the same issue over and over again, it's probably a good sign to do some work on yourself. So, what I'm wanting to do this month is really support us, each and every one of us, in recognizing what fits within a possible codependency bubble. If you're not somebody who's prone to codependency, this might not be the talk for you. But more than likely, in general, there are many of us who really do need to deal with codependency stuff. And so recognizing within the codependency bubble what fits, what stands out, whenever I named off all those things, what stands out to you as this is something I could work on. And when it comes to red flags, whether within yourself or in situations that you find yourself in, possible relationship or partnership or friendship with another person, what are the red flags? What are the deal breakers? It's important to be willing to recognize, own, and be responsible for what works for you and what doesn't work for you. And also knowing where to stretch, where to allow ourselves to branch out in a healthy way. Red flag, not necessarily a place to branch out. A deal breaker, maybe. Codependency stuff, a place to reach out. If you're a perfectionist, branch out a little bit. Try not to be so perfectionist. If you're a know-it-all, try not to feel like you know it all. Those are places where we get to reach out and branch out. If you're not good at taking responsibility, start taking responsibility for the things that you see and do and act upon in your life. If you blame others a lot, start noticing that and just, try not to blame others so much, but also don't take on so much responsibility that you don't know how to set boundaries. So setting boundaries, all these pieces are so important to a healthy environment within. And if you want to own your voice, if you want to own your power, and you want to stand in your power, it's very important to recognize a lot of the aspects of the things that I've just spoken about. So this week, I challenge you to take note of the things that you notice about yourself that are either codependent or red flags or deal breakers that you'd like to work on for yourself or in relationship with others. The goal here is to be strong within self, have your own power, own your voice, own yourself, and be you out loud. Have a blessed and beautiful day.